Good morning. Stan Stahl here with Secure the Village. Welcome to our May webinar, where our guest is Stacey Wright of the Cybercrime Support Network. We're very glad to have Stacey with us this morning. We'll be talking to her in just a minute. We are Secure the Village, a community-based response to the cybercrime and privacy crisis. And with the vision of a cybersecure global village, we turn people and organizations into cyber guardians, from the boardroom all the way to the living room. We meet monthly in this webinar with the idea of providing practical, real-world guidance to basically to the world in the subject of cybersecurity. With that, let me introduce my guest, Stacey Wright. Good morning, Stacey.
Hi.
And I will also move the slideshow. So we are now looking at Stacey and the cyber, she's Vice President of Cyber Resiliency Services, as you can see, with the Cybercrime Support Network. Welcome, glad to have you on our on the webinar this month.
Thank you, Stan. Definitely my honor. I think this means I'm part of the village now, right?
You are definitely part of the village, boy. And it really takes a village. I mean, we're seeing that with Colonial Pipeline now, and you know, it's like it's getting out of control. If
yes.
You know? So, just to get us started, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you find yourself into this space of cybersecurity and all the great things you do? Yeah.
So I am a total geek. I got started way back in the day. Literally my first computer. I did not know my numbers or colors. So my dad wrote a script that had me programming in BASIC to draw pretty flowers on the screen. But I had to actually know my numbers and colors to make the flowers in the right number of flowers in the right colors.
Got it.
And so I am, yeah, I'm that person. I have grown up around computers.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, go figure. My dad was in the business in, well, back then, computers. There wasn't really a cybersecurity component back then, but I just grew up. I remember laptops that if you dared to rest them on your lap, they weighed 35 pounds, they put your legs to sleep. I remember going through school and learning to write code, figuring out that I really hated programming, and then discovering this cool thing called cybersecurity during the dot-com boom. And there you go. All of a sudden, the rest of my career, it was this combination of criminal justice, which was really my passion, and the fact that I could work a computer and thus cybersecurity.
Wow, that's interesting. Bringing those two fields together in you with your background, particularly. I mean, I'm particularly curious how different people find their way into cybersecurity, because truly it takes a village, and that with you, your intersection of those things.
Yeah, I got lucky. I'm not joking. My whole career has been the case of recognizing the right thing at the right time and just getting lucky. I was in college for criminal justice because I wanted to work in law enforcement. And then I realized that I was good with computers. And I guess I had sort of known that, but I hadn't known compared to most people. I was just used to making a computer do what I want. And that was just what I did. I didn't realize that wasn't normal. So I started taking programming courses, discovered I hated it. There was no other such degree or anything back then, but that's okay. And one day, it's the funniest story. I was interning at a police department, and I was a crime analyst sitting doing my little criminal justice work. And all of a sudden, these two detectives walk in the front door of the room I'm in. One of them positions himself in front of me. They grab the IT guy and they proceed to walk him out of the back door of the police station and in the front door and arrest him for cyber stalking. It was an interesting experience, to say the least.
Sure.
And well, I knew how to work computers. So the IT guy who worked in a different building called me up one day and he said, you know those Ethernet cables? Can you tell me if this computer is plugged in? I can't remote into it. He didn't want to drive over to our building. Okay, I went over and did it. And he found out he could call me for everything. And all of a sudden, I'm working IT for public safety and ended up getting a job working for him doing IT for a 911 center, fire department, and police department. Intersection of right place, right time, and two things I like.
That's beautiful, the way, you know, when life works out.
Yeah.
In those ways, and you find yourself, I mean, it's, you know, I mean, here you are with those skills, those talents, those passions, and like the way the whole thing comes together. And just talking to you, it's clear what gets you up in the morning. You kind of, yeah, you like this. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, 3 alarm clocks get me up in the morning. But what keeps me up late at night is this stuff.
There you go. Yes, I understand. It's that first cup of coffee that's kind of absolutely critical for me. And I guess that helps explain, just as you tell that story, you know, that why the focus on victims and small businesses and that. I mean, it's like you've gotten to see, sadly, some of the reality that's out there.
If you've looked up my history, you know I work for the FBI. I spent a lot of time working for the Center for Internet Security, helping state and local governments. There are too many times that I got called and it was somebody's worst day. They had lost $100,000 or 1 million records or something like that. Cybersecurity matters, but I wanted to be able to help them not just do the recovery, but more about understanding what was happening to them and then how you get past this, how you move on and go back to growing your business, making sure your citizens feel safe talking to you as a government agency.
Yeah, no, that's so vital and so important. It's also, I want to move on to the next slide because it begins to frame kind of the challenge that you see directly, and then you, of course, in Cybercrime Support Network, what you collectively see as well. And it's, to me, just an illustration as we're going to go into this and into some of the challenges with victims and so on, that there is such a need to kind of pull all this information together and provide ways to help, whether they're not yet victims and want to protect themselves, or whether they are sadly victims. And we just saw an illustration just a couple of weeks ago. Sadly, a law firm was business email compromised and sent $900,000 out the door. And it's just, I mean, I've learned to equate the money with jobs.
Yes.
Just use a nominal 100,000 a year, because I can do the math that way. These are 9 jobs that have went away, and just one incident that way. So again, just let's talk a few minutes about kind of the nature and extent of the problem, if you will.
Well, I think what you just brought up is a perfect example. That law firm lost $900,000. Who do they call?
No.
Right. Yeah. That's so much the problem. Now, 900,000, maybe a call to the FBI or the Secret Service. Maybe there's something happening at a federal level. Maybe those bad guys are in another country, so it can become a federal crime. But if I get ransomware on my computer, not my business, just my computer, or I get malware, who do I call? Where do I get help? There is nobody. If I'm walking down the street and somebody holds me up and says, hand over your wallet, well, I know who to call. I call 911, and that's okay. They can respond to that. Kristen Judge, who founded Cybercrime Support Network, CSN, my company, really recognized that there wasn't really anybody you could call for these small crimes. And like me, she felt bad for the victims. So she tells this story about how somebody called her when she was an elected official and said, I've been a victim, what do I do now? And there wasn't an answer. And she called all her friends and us cyber geeks, and we could say, okay, here's technically what to do, but this person couldn't do any of that. They didn't understand what we meant when we were talking about reimaging a computer.
Mm-hmm.
So she really got thinking about it, and that's what Cybercrime Support Network came out of, is this problem that there are a lot of resources out there. There are geeks like us. Mm-hmm. But to take your analogy of securing the village, you have to know to go talk to the blacksmith or the baker or whom that person is in the village that actually knows the cybersecurity side of the house, because the blacksmith or the baker may not be able to help you when it comes to your computer. So finding those resources, finding the right person in the village, finding how that person can then report it so that everybody understands the problem and is aware of it, but also so we can dedicate the resources at the federal level to fixing it. Mm-hmm. Understanding it in such a way that law enforcement and 911, the people you should normally go to, have the resources that they can respond to your complaint. And then making sure that all three of those pull together in such a way that not only do you as the victim get the help you need, but you also get the emotional support and the long-term support. So many of these crimes aren't just one and dones. The law firm you mentioned, $900,000. That's going to have a lasting impact on this firm. As you said, 9 people right there, 9 jobs potentially gone. How do they get the money back? But more importantly, how do they keep going? How do they rebuild their clientele base? Because they're going to lose clients. Mm-hmm. How did the person who accidentally fell for this and did the wire transfer, how do they emotionally recover from something like that? If you're a romance scam victim, you thought you're in love with somebody, and now you find out that they're a fake person. That's emotional trauma. So it's about pulling together the resources, making sure we have enough resources by understanding the reporting, getting those resources to the right people who can make a difference, and then finding the criminals and supporting the victims, really, supporting the individuals and small businesses, because it's so much more than just, okay, I lost $900,000, business tomorrow.
Yeah, what you say is so true. I mean, when you talk about, like, for example, romance scams, I heard the deputy district attorney a couple of years ago here in Los Angeles tell a story of a woman who got embroiled in a romance scam, only to be the conduit through which $700,000 business email compromise, online bank fraud, basically, the money was transferred from the victim into her bank account, and she then transferred it onto her presumed lover.
Yeah.
And he was now, okay, the business is ending. I'll be coming to see you soon. I love you, blah, blah, blah. And the next time she hears not from him, but about him, is when there's a knock on her door, and it's the FBI, because she's been the conduit here. And oh my God, I mean, being out the money, because part of her plea deal with the government was to make restitution. So there, she's out to $700,000, presumably plus interest and so on. But as you see, dealing with the trauma of that, and we're learning how really difficult trauma is and how it stays with us unless we find ways to release it at all.
Yes.
This is, as you say, just becomes so very, very real. And I think part of the way that we release the trauma is we get to, if we can talk to the right people, if we can talk to law enforcement, if law enforcement helps us find the criminal, that helps in the trauma reduction. And yet that's so hard to do as well.
Yeah. How do you police somebody who is, I would say, half a world away, but maybe further? Mm-hmm. On another continent, in another country, different sets of laws, especially where some of those countries may not even have laws making what they did illegal.
Yeah.
That's a challenge.
Oh, a big one. I'm now reading Nicole Perlroth's book. This is How They Tell Me the World Ends, which is a story of cybercrime for the last 2 decades, basically. And I've lived through all of these. You've lived through all of these, as point incidents, if you will. And part of the value of her book is bringing it all together so you can see it as for what it is, as a totality. And she makes the point, and it goes to the finding the criminal is hard part, that Vladimir Putin has 2 rules for cyber criminals inside of Russia. And boy, it's like right out of the opening scene of The Godfather, if you remember the movie. You know, you can do whatever you want, just don't attack us.
Yep.
And number 2, when I need you and call you, you will show up.
Yeah.
And you think about that what that means is Vladimir Putin has the resources of the entire cybercrime industry in Russia at his disposal. Oh my God. And he keeps them safe.
So the way I try to remind people is this is their day job. That cybercrime industry is their day job. If you're living below the poverty level, you have no chance of education. You have no chance of getting out, getting a good job. And suddenly you can write a piece of malware. You can self-teach yourself programming code or buy it online and use a piece of malware and make what to the United States is $10,000. That's enormous. Mm-hmm. And now your president is telling you that I'm not going to come after you. We're not going to care about you because it's okay. You're doing it against our enemies, so it's all right. And Russia is not the only country to have that attitude, which is both a little scary and a little disheartening.
Yeah. And it's, you know, when we look at the victims, and I'm going to go on to the next slide and kind of let's just focus here for a few moments. And your heart's got to go out to the victims of cybercrime. And the numbers are only growing. Yes.
So the way I look about this slide, we say 1 in 4 adults is impacted by cybercrime each year. We are not yet halfway through the year. And I would tell you 1/4 of the United States has already been impacted. But more than that, Colonial Pipeline, 1 incident, ransomware infecting the gas pipeline, 1/4 of the United States was impacted, not because they lost money or their identities, but because of the gas pipeline, they had to worry about getting fuel in their cars. Well, at this point, I don't think 1 out of 4 impacted is accurate. I think 1 out of 4 adults directly impacted. Yeah. I would argue every adult and probably every child in the United States is impacted by cybercrime in some fashion every year.
Yeah. Well, just using the Colonial Pipeline as an example, if we do nothing more than just look at the increase in gas prices caused by the shutdown of Colonial Pipeline, and I'm out here in California, which is very far away from Colonial Pipeline, but I've seen our gas prices go up as well because it is a supply and demand. You know, I mean, Adam Smith was right in that context. And so we've all been impacted. And I'm seeing numbers like total cybercrime, I don't know if this is worldwide or just the US, probably worldwide, in the trillions of dollars a year impact.
So we estimate, we in the business think that maybe we know about 10 to 12% of cybercrime gets reported, especially from individuals. Trillions of dollars are an easy estimate because think about if 10% are reporting it and we have $4.2 billion in victim losses last year. Well, that math is a little painful to start doing. And when you start figuring out this does not include the big businesses, the businesses where the average data breach costs them $3 million to recover from, it just keeps snowballing. But to go back to Colonial Pipeline, you said you in California. Well, now the government is looking at, well, how do we secure pipelines? How do we make sure this doesn't happen again? Which is great. That's going to take governmental resources. That's going to take other resources. So where does that long-term cost come from? Does it come from a gas increase that the price never goes back lower? Is there an additional penny per gallon that has to go to security everywhere? Yeah. Or are we talking about our tax dollars that could be funding a different program now have to fund our gas supply to make sure that we can get gasoline for our cars to go to work.
Yeah.
There are long-term impacts, and it comes down to there's no simple solution.
Yeah, that's such a fundamental piece. I mean, when you look at these numbers and you look at, the government's response, we had very quickly, and this now goes back a week or so when it happened, Biden issued an executive order that was in the works even before Colonial Pipeline and deals with some of the matters that are associated with that. It's got much stronger supply chain requirements that go back to things like solar winds, which was not the first of these supply chain attacks. We've seen them for 20 years. Those of us who kind of live in this space. And then you look at, I don't know what the number is. It's 70, 80, 90%. I haven't a clue what the right number is. I just know it's up in that space of the internet that lives in private hands, which means that the government can't directly control it, manage it, if you will, but has to put in place laws, regulations, incentives, motivations, et cetera, so that companies in the private sector do the right thing as well. I mean, it would be nice if the Colonial Pipelines of the world did a better job of protecting against phishing attacks, made sure they didn't have password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as a critical password into some fundamental piece of their business, and implement multi-factor authentication. But it's hard to require that as much as how do we enthuse and motivate the private sector to do the things that it ought to be doing, so that we don't have 49 million unreported victims or more, but that we begin to work our way around this.
I would take it a step further. How do we even do that? Should it be government doing that? Or should it be we, the consumers, saying, no, I'm not going to buy that really cool smartwatch or that really cool smart fridge unless you can tell me it's secure. But I mean, I know myself, I have IoT in my house. There's value to me in owning it. That's great. Those of you watching this, please don't hack it. I would appreciate that. But I mean, if there's value to me and I'm willing to pay the price for the convenience, part of that price is the lack of security. So is it even a government requirement to secure it? Does the price for security really have to be you and I saying, no, we aren't going to buy it unless it's secure, unless you maintain its security?
Yeah, I can also speak very personally to that, because we put solar panels on our roof about 1.5 years ago. And a piece of the system includes internet IoT access into the internet, so that the company that put on the solar system, can manage it, so that my wife and I can look at the numbers and be proud of, pat ourselves in the back, look what we're doing, and so on. And so at the one level, California has an IoT security law, the basics. I'm not talking about anything really super, but at least it covers, you got to have password protection, and it's got to be upgradable by the vendor, and the basics. But at the same time, when it came to integrating the solar system into my home network, which also has this computer, which I would like to keep secure, I do work on this. Not the holy of holies work, so to speak. I've got a separate system for that. But for a lot of the things that I do, I don't want this, So I had to set up my firewall, segment those things out. Now, that's no big deal for me. I know that I need to do it, and I don't know how to do it myself personally, but I know who to call.
There you go.
The average homeowner, the average user, is lost here.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that even gets us to the next slide. It's titled "Navigating the Landscape," and it's just to me, it's an illustration of, oh my God, it really is complicated for consumers and small businesses.
Yeah. The scary part is this is just a part of the federal cyber enforcement landscape. This isn't cyber in general. It's not cybersecurity. And it's really just the enforcement departments and agencies at the federal level. I don't know how many people realize groups like the United States Postal Inspection Service get involved in cybercrime. Department of State, these are agencies you may not think of at the get-go, but they are helping to secure our country at the federal level. If this is what it looks like to just try and keep the .gov space and the .mil space protected, can you imagine how much more complex it gets when you start involving state and local government, state and local law enforcement, cybersecurity agencies, not just enforcement agencies?
Mm-hmm.
It just all of a sudden becomes a mishmash. And for all that they have done some really great work about trying to say, okay, you have this problem, go to this agency. This problem, go to this agency. We're still in the wild, wild west stage. It's still a question about which agency you go to. And I couldn't even tell you if I had a problem that I would know which agency to report it to. All I know is if I don't report it, then the resources to fix it never get reassigned. The government never knows that a problem exists, so they can't do anything to fix it long term. So it's a vicious cycle, which is what makes the spinning wheel kind of ironic here, is that it just keeps spinning.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so true. As you're talking, I'm thinking about just, again, here in Los Angeles, just our illustration over the last several years, we have a very active district attorney's office in cybercrime.
Oh, yes.
We have our own FBI, group here. We've got an LA Electronic Crimes Task Force, which is Secret Service, also active here in LA. But the LA Electronic Crimes Task Force includes LA Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, the Highway Patrol, the District Attorney's Office, and FBI Secret Service as well. And over the years, it's been, okay, if I have a client or someone I know comes to me as a victim, who do I call? And it was always, well, you could call any of us and we'll get it to the right place. And, it's now become almost one of those. Fortunately, I've got one person, he's a friend, he's in law enforcement, I've known him for years, I can trust him, I can call him. But that's not an answer that scales at all.
No.
And instead of that, I'm going to go to the next slide. This is what we get. I love this slide. Yeah.
I love it too. This really represents so much of the issue. If you or we both know the right person to call. We have that friend we can talk to. But if you or I didn't have that person and just did an internet search, we would be looking at finding one of these hotlines. And most of them aren't going to refer the report to another hotline. That's not how they work, although there is some sharing that happens between the hotlines. And a lot of these, you'll notice these are links. There's a complaint form. There's a report form. Those are not places where you call and get assistance. They are places where, okay, you can report it, but then it just kind of disappears into the black hole of government. And know that, yes, somebody is looking at it, somebody is reading it, but you may never get a call back, which is very frustrating too. So it becomes this perpetuating, I reported it, nobody got back to me. There's nothing they can do about it anyways. Why should I report it the next time? Then there are no resources that come along. It's a cycle.
Yeah. Yep. No, so very, very true. And again, that goes as well to what we discussed earlier, the trauma aspect, because there's no way in this kind of mishmash that you can release that trauma, where somebody sympathetic or empathetic is actually talking to you and talking you through that and giving you the chance to live through the difficulties you faced and giving you some support that even if we can't find the criminal, there's still things we can do.
Right. There are things we can do to make your life easier, your life better. That romance scam victim you're talking about, I had one that I dealt with early in my career, and it wasn't actually even the victim that came in. It was an elderly man who fell for a romance scam. mortgaged his house. He had a very nice house, got lucky. Property values from the time he bought it to that time had increased significantly. So he put a second mortgage on his house. His son reported the crime, and I felt so horrible because the victim kept saying, no, it's a real relationship. They were incredibly embarrassed about it. They didn't want to talk to us. And the only reason the son reported it is because the house now had a second mortgage on it large enough that there was going to be no inheritance. We would have never known about the crime otherwise. Even now, more than a decade later, I think about that man and really wish I had been in a position where I could have gone over to his house, baked him some cookies, and said, it's okay, let's talk through this.
Yeah.
You know, that's what you're saying doesn't exist in a lot of these hotlines or even in law enforcement. And to be honest, it's probably not a police officer's job to hold your hand and say, you've been through a trauma, let's talk about it. Let me bake you some cookies.
Yeah.
There are other things they have to be doing.
I love the metaphor. Add to the list of things you do to help the victim. Bring them cookies. So, yeah, that's a segue into let's shift from the victims and the challenges. I mean, the reality of that to the Cybercrime Support Network specifically, and the kinds of things that you do besides bringing cookies. Yeah.
Well, in all fairness, I used to say I would bake them brownies. But then I said that in Colorado one trip, and they pointed out that pot brownies were a thing there because it was legal. Yeah. And so that just had to go away.
Right. It'd be the same here in California. So, yeah. Let's stay with cookies. Yeah.
Yep. So cookies. Yeah. So unfortunately, Cybercrime Support Network doesn't bake cookies for people. We're not at that stage yet, although I keep hoping that would be really wonderful one day. What we are about is trying to help people recognize when they are potentially at risk of falling for one of these scams or frauds or crimes, whatever it is. Help them understand where the value comes from to accurately report it. This isn't just fill out a form. It needs to be accurate. Then help them recover. And that means everything from, okay, you lost $900,000. Are you going to be able to eat dinner tonight? Do you have the money to heat your house? Can you pay your telephone bill? Can you get some of the basic essentials you need to be safe and secure tonight in your home, let alone 6 months from now? Or have you lost so much that you don't have that ability anymore? So it's about both the short-term recovery, but also the very long-term after effects. And then finally about reinforcing, because we know that somebody who has fallen victim once is more likely to fall victim a second time. I would love to say you learn from it, and you do, but there are so many different variants out there. As you know, all the different pieces of malware, all the different scams. Change something just slightly, you've got a whole new crime, and it looks nothing alike. But now your name is on a list, just like you're on the junk mail list and the phone call list for donations. You're on the list that they know you fell for something and they can come back to target you again.
Yeah. And sadly, they do. So we're trying to stop that. We're trying to make an impact here. I think you can drop the word trying. And I might encourage you to I mean,
fair enough.
In the time I've known all of you, and I look at the impact that you're having, and not just you, but others as well that are fighting this. I'm not going to say we're turned the corner, we're not even, if I can paraphrase, Winston Churchill, we're not even at the beginning of the end. We're still at the beginning of the beginning, if you will. But the work that you guys are doing, I just find just so valuable to the community. I'm grateful to the Cybercrime Support Network for all that you're doing here.
Well, thank you. I have to say, it's truly an honor and a privilege to be a part of it.
Yeah, yeah, I hear you. Let's talk about some of the specific things now that that you're doing.
Yes. So, bunch of different programs, bunch of different ways we're trying to make a difference. We recently started the military and veteran campaign. Turns out, and I didn't even know this until I started digging into it as part of CSN, the military members and veterans and their families are targeted by different scams and different crimes than target non-military, non-veterans. They are also, in some cases, more likely to fall for some of these scams. So like government imposter scams, they have a trust of the government, which makes a lot of sense. With my background, I tend to trust the government. So we are more vulnerable to some of these. So the military and veteran campaign started in April is a campaign to try and help that specific community. We also work on two CISA, so Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, cooperative agreements to look at the ways to expand reporting, to the ways to making it easier. I lead a cooperative agreement called NIEM, so it's the National Information Exchange Model. It's really an international model, and we're building out the cyber vocabulary so that we can all talk together. We can do a better job about sharing reporting. This isn't about replacing something like STIX or Verus. They're really cool taxonomies that exist. It's about expanding them so that if you use STIX, I use Verus, and we need to talk to somebody in the agricultural domain, and agriculture has their own language, we can still do it. Secure Together is a new program. It's got a series of webinars right now. And then we're starting a national campaign to get people who are a little bit more savvy with things like two-factor authentication to go and help their neighbors, help their family members who are not. So it's a simple one, sit down together, secure each other. Mm-hmm. Peer support, I love. This is for romance scam victims. It is literally a peer support program. So those victims can talk to each other, talk with a licensed counselor, and heal. And then, of course, we have the websites, scamspotter.org to help folks understand if they're at risk, and Fight Cybercrime, which has mostly a huge catalog of resources to help anybody who is a potential victim, as well as things like newsletter links, Secure the Village, all those good stuff.
Good. I've just made a note because we want to put scamspotter.org in our library so that people can find it and connect to it.
That'd be great.
And that's what we try to be all about, is how do we bring all these resources together in not as a replacement, but as to augment. It's just, one never knows what Google searches or other searches one is going to do that's going to lead you into the cybersecurity world. So it's like this is, to us, one of those places where collaboration is just so valuable.
Collaboration is key. There are a ton of great resources out there. Getting the people who need those resources to the right resource in a way that they can understand the resource is wonderful. Mm-hmm. I don't want to send, my neighbor who has trouble hooking up her internet to a website that talks, let's say the NSA website. They've got some really great resources. Mm-hmm. They know what they're doing when it comes to computer stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not even sure she would understand the title of some of those resources, let alone be able to understand if she should implement them on her home network, which pretty much consists of a TV and a cell phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As you said, we have friends that are in that same space. It's just, they don't understand this, and it's in part, they shouldn't have to. At the same time, and we've got to do more. But then, to that same extent, we happen to be living in a time in evolution when the technology and the crime are way ahead of people's ability to kind of grasp it and get their arms around it. So all the more reason why you're needed, we're needed, and so many others as well on this.
The best I can hope for is for the good guys to be just as creative as the bad guys.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You've set us a challenge, Stacey. But we're up to it. Yeah.
All right.
Yes. Truth, justice, in the American way. So with that, let's move on to kind of, so what are some of your successes?
So success for us really means going back to those 4 base principles. So starting with increased reporting, because everything else sort of ties around that. You have to understand what happened to you. You have to recognize that you were impacted by something and then be able to report it accurately. If we can increase reporting, we can also then start to increase recovery. We can take folks that, like our neighbors, like our friends, who just don't have a lot of skills, and get them the help they need to make their more secure. Turn on 2-factor authentication. Password protect your cell phone. Password protect your cell phone in a password that I cannot guess, as I pointed out recently to a certain somebody. It's not a good thing if I can guess your password. Those little steps make a huge difference, but then increasing recovery also in terms of emotional and physical, financial recovery, looking at cybercrime not just as cyber, but as a holistic crime, a crime that affects every part of your life, every part of you, who you are, and what makes you confident in who you are. And then using all of that, increase the resources. So if we know the crime is happening, if we know there's a problem, we can turn around and get proper resources out there to not just make sure that people can recover, but also to help them reinforce how not to fall victim, how to recognize in the future. So it becomes this multi-stage process that one leads to the other, that leads to the other. That's how we define mission success. Mm-hmm. If we can get it from maybe 10% of people report to 90% of people report, that would be amazing. Mm-hmm. Having that knowledge, can you imagine what you could do with that data? Oh, how we could change the world if we knew what was really happening? Yeah.
Yeah. No, when I imagine the opportunities that big data gives us here, and that's more reporting from insurance companies that collect a lot of this information for those victims who have insurance, requiring it in the case of critical infrastructure, and even beyond that, just encouraging victims. And as you've been talking over the hour, helping them understand that in the reporting comes the healing as well, in part, and how important that piece of it. I think it's also an opportunity for a shout out, if you will, for us. One of our board members, Steve Krantz, has a book called Cyber Guardian, a Secure the Village Guide for Residents. It's available on Kindle. And Steve and I are taking that and turning it into an app that will actually be practical. It won't just tell you what to do. You'll check off, yes, I've frozen my credit. Good, you checked that. You checked that box. Yes, I've added multi-factor authentication on my various email and bank accounts and so on. So we're looking at this as an interactive tool for users, all of which, it goes to, if you're a victim, report it. And here's how. We'll link this, the app, to SecureTheVillage, to the Cybercrime Support Network, and to others as well. But again, it's only going to be one piece of the puzzle. It's this whole holistic situation that we find ourselves in.
Yes, and even that piece, as wonderful as it sounds, and I have to admit, you just hooked me, but
Yeah.
We have to make sure people get to it. We have to get the word out, and we have to do it in a way that you don't see the word cyber and run away because it's that scary stuff you don't understand.
Yeah, yeah.
I have learned never use cyber as a presentation title because you will not get people coming to your presentation.
Sadly, that's so true. There's this, I don't understand it. It's all complex and abstract, and therefore I will run away from it. And yes, we definitely have to break that, all the way through our K through 12 education system as well. And, I mean, you work there, there are other organizations that work there as well. We've got a workforce working group that meets monthly that is, initially we've been focusing on the workforce challenges, but the more we get into it, the more we understand that it's also K through 12, that we've got to be educating people into what all of this is. We've only got a few minutes left. You're a nonprofit. You're like Secure the Village this way. You live and die on the support you get from others. Yes. How do the people watching this support you? How can we all help?
So if you want me to keep baking cookies, I think that's probably the easiest way to say it. If you want us to support, going to our website, cybercrimesupport.org, there is a link on there to donate. Honestly, we are, because we're a nonprofit, because we are small, we're nimble, just like Secure the Village. We have the opportunity to do things like these peer support groups where we're bringing people together to heal, where we're doing things out of the box and innovative. And that's what we're really looking for. If somebody walks in the door and says, here's $10 million, go change the world, we will. No question asked. But small donations count too. Donations that help us bring programs to the people who actually need them. We recently got a donation of a couple $1,000s. Maybe that doesn't pay my salary for a year. That's okay. But it does help us get to the point where somebody's life is going to be made better. In fact, a couple $1,000s makes a lot of people's lives better. It means a lot of things can be done to help them in a different way. So we're always looking for donors, willing to donate money, but also willing to give us ideas and innovative solutions that we can take from other criminal spaces and move into cyber.
That's, to me, that's such an important one. Again, it's the village at work. Yes. This idea of, building a taxonomy, for example, of cybercrime like you're doing blows me away, because it's like, if anywhere in the country, if somebody breaks into my house and I call law enforcement, I'll be able to describe what happened in a way that they're going to be able to make sense of it and share it with other law enforcement agencies. Yeah. I would presume that goes on in cyber, and it's like right hand and left hand, and the support you need, financial and other, I think is just it's out there. I would encourage any cybersecurity professional, whether you're like we are, doing security consulting for companies. I'm talking about the company I work for, not just Secure the Village now, but we're a security vendor in that sense. So a security consulting company, or you're in law enforcement, or you're a cyber attorney, or you're in cyber insurance. I would encourage you, get involved with the Cybercrime Support Network, because you're such an important piece of all of this. Yes.
I would point out that one of our biggest sponsors is the jewelry company to help with romance scams. We need to take it beyond cyber. That's really key. We need to get to the point where we're not saying, okay, it's a cyber issue. This is an issue. We need to solve it together as the village.
Yes, yeah, well said. With that, let me go back to our, the other slideshow, this one, and kind of begin to wrap things up. We're getting up to the top of the hour. This has been fabulous, Stacey. It's just really just such an insightful discussion around some of these challenges as well. We've got a lot of different programs, as you can see. This webinar is the second Thursday of every month. A couple of events that are just open-ended come and let's talk if you're a cybersecurity professional. That's the second Tuesday, Security and Privacy Leadership Team, and the third Monday, the Security Leadership Happy Hour. But we've also got a group that focuses right on that intersection of technology and security management, because that's where so much of this occurs, that intersection between MSPs and MSSPs and so on. And then another group that focuses on financial services very specifically. That's the third Friday of every month. And then we will have events for residents periodically. Perhaps we might want to schedule one with you, with the I'd
love to,
Support Network, really. And that's devoted really to helping the end users. It's not like this, which is more broad and general that way. But those are our programs. Please, come to them at all times and use the resources of Secure the Village. It's an entry point into the Cybercrime Support Network and to others as well that way. I never end without at least a shout out to the book I wrote called The Agnostic Patriot. This is a series of essays that I started writing after 9/11 that just, it touched my heart. Back then, what was I thankful for that year? That resulted in what is now 19 years of essays that I collected together into a book. And it's not right or left or Republican or Democrat or pro this or anti that. The only thing it is very pro the Declaration of Independence and the preamble. I take very as sacred the secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Yes. I mean, to me, that just, that's America. That's what my grandparents came to America for, if you will. And I find it fascinating that it ties into cybersecurity, because so much of what's at risk here is the result of cybercrime on the one side and all the manipulation of the social media on the other. So, enough of my own commercial, if you will. But Stacey, here's contact information. People can reach you, Wright at the cybercrimesupport.org. I'm at Stan at SecureTheVillage.org. This has been fabulous. Again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Final thoughts. Yeah.
I'm going to leave with, I'd love to come back. As you said, it's been fabulous. It's always great to talk with you, Stan. And for everyone listening, if you see an opportunity to make a difference, I would say take it. You have skills in the cybersecurity space that so many others don't have. And if you can save one person from losing the $900,000, that's life-changing.
Yeah. Well said. It's such a challenge. And as you say, there are lots of us, not enough, but lots of us who've got skills and talents and understanding in this space, and encouragement to everybody out there, come play with us. We need you all. So definitely do that. Again, Secure the Village. It's been delightful. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, Stacey.
Thank you, Stan.